the Finance and Operations Committee will please come to order. I will turn over the Finance and Operations Committee meeting to myself. Mr. Rogers, please begin with an overview of your agenda items for this evening. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Tonight we have two agenda items. The first is in regards to the 2020 bond issuance, which will require board action. PFM Financial Advisors and RBC Capital Markets will provide an update about the district's 2020 financing plan. The second item is regarding policies, which will also require board action. Policy 805.2, school security personnel, and Policy 913, non-school organizations, groups, and individuals.
Please proceed with your first agenda item, sir.
At this time, I will ask PFM and RBC to join the call and provide their presentation.
Okay, great. This is Zach Williams from PFM. So also on the phone is Mike Lillis and Lauren Stedell from RBC Capital Markets, and we're going to walk through a handout that I think should be in front of you. It's titled Financing Discussion, and it has a blue banner on the front with the Upper Darby logo.
We have that up. You're good to go, Zach.
Okay. So we'll start on page number 1, which is an interest rate chart. Okay, if you kind of scroll to the middle of the page, it's the second of the 3 charts. And I think the takeaway here is pre-COVID-19, interest rates had reached all-time historic lows. So it was a good time to borrow money. Here in the last 2 weeks, the market, has gotten a little confused about all the economic uncertainty. Okay, so you do see a spike in interest rates. I think we expect, as we work through this and as the different fiscal stimulus packages, kind of work into the system, that the markets will stabilize. And, sometime later this spring and summer, we'll be back to kind of, what we'll call the new normal, which we, would expect to hopefully be very healthy, low interest rates, and still a good time to be in the market for a new borrowing. The second page, if you scroll to page number 2, this is what we call your debt summary, okay? The top half of this page shows your different borrowings, your different bond issues, the principal and interest payments, and then on the far right in column 10, it shows what would appear in your budget as your total debt service line item. Okay. The bottom half of this page is what we call your local effort, and that is net of the state reimbursement that you receive on a few of your borrowings. And then on the far right, in column 20, is your net local share after you get that state reimbursement back. The reason this page is important is because when we talk about the overall financing plan, okay, we always assume that when you did new borrowings, a new bond issue to fund projects, that the new debt service was going to wrap around the old debt service. And what that does is it helps to minimize the overall budget impact of these projects. So as your old debt begins to pay off out in budget year 2030, that's when the new debt will take effect, keeping an overall level debt service structure. So we'll show you that again here in a moment, but just keep that concept in your head, that's important. As you scroll to page number 3, we just wanted to lay out some facts for everybody. At the top, there's a market update. Again, I think the main point of the market is right now, it's pretty uncertain. But as we kind of go through the next weeks and, month or two, we expect more market clarity. And we'll be in touch with district administration and the board to make sure that you all understand the type of market that we're in before we would go into the market and issue any bonds. If you scroll to item number 2, it says multi-year financing plan, step number 2, okay, series of 2020 borrowing. If you remember, last year was when the multi-year financing plan was established to fund a number of different projects. Last year you did borrow $6 million, which funded some small startup projects. It was always assumed leading into 2020 that step 2 of this plan was going to finance a maximum amount of $38 million. Most of this was going to go towards Aronimink Elementary and then various other projects that you were planning to complete in the summer of 2020 and the summer of 2021. Okay? The fourth bullet there talks about the expected timing, which was a spring and summer bid of the Aronimink project, and then construction beginning in the fall of 2020. So as you know, this project evolves, kind of similar to the market situation, we will adjust, what the plan is for the borrowing. So if you now scroll down to number 3 under next steps, okay, one of the main items to move forward with is the land development plan that will be in front of the township, at some point in the future. And depending on whether that's approved, we could then move forward with a borrowing which we expect to be in the range of 30 to 38 million. And it says final details pending because we're going to work with your architect, KCBA, and the administration to make sure we're borrowing the appropriate amount of money, not too much, not too little. If for some reason the land development plan is not approved, it's then expected that we may still move forward with the borrowing, but with the size of more of the $10 to $15 million range. Again, final details pending, based on the need for, what the projects are that you want to complete. Okay? So what's being asked of you tonight is the authorization for the financing team, which you can see listed there as PFM, so that's myself, RBC Capital Markets, your underwriter, and Fox Rothschild, and your solicitor, to just begin all of the background steps and the paperwork that need to happen ahead of a borrowing. This doesn't lock you into any borrowing, but it just gets us, kind of a 4-week head start so we can start to knock out, a lot of the work that we can do behind the scenes. And then we'll regroup, again, with district administration here, over the next few weeks, to see, how things are developing, and that's how we'll kind of finalize what the plan is moving forward. And so on page 4, assuming that we move forward with some of this, okay, the earliest possible date that the district can take formal board action on a debt resolution, we have listed here as April 14th. So it might turn out that maybe we don't do it on April 14th and this might come at the following meeting or something like that, but this is the earliest possible timeline to adopt the maximum framers resolution. And that would then allow the financing team, as we continue to prepare and can get your credit rating and finish all of the things that we need to work through, you would then be able to enter the market, when the district administration lets us know it's a good time that we're all ready to go. And once we realize and hopefully get to a point where the market has calmed down and, we've kind of gotten that market clarity that we're looking for. This timeline, assuming that we go ahead and lock in interest rates in late April or early May, would then have money for the district to spend on projects. As you can see there, it says late May and early June of 2020. Okay, so that's kind of the early timeline. And if we decide to push things back a little bit, this just gives you an idea. So, for example, if we push things back to the the May meeting, things will then move back into probably money late June, early July timeframe. And the final page here that we're going to walk through is page number 5. Now, you've seen different versions of this page over the last 12 or 18 months. Okay. This page here is meant to isolate only the maximum amount of $38 million if we were to use that as your borrowing in column 4. Okay. So what this shows, if you start in column 2, it shows the existing debt And remember, that debt was going to originally pay off in 2026. Then last year in 2019, you borrowed about $6.5 million. And if you scroll down to column 3 in the orange, you can see how we wrapped the new debt around your old debt to minimize the budget impact. And then we're going to use the same strategy in column 4, where it says estimated series of 2020 in the amount of just shy of $38 million, which again would be a maximum amount. And as you scroll down that column 4, you can see the payments are are lighter, about $1.3 million. And then as your old debt begins to pay off, you can see the payments ramp up to about a $3.2 million number. So when all the dust settles, and you have your projects for $38 million, you have all that money in the bank to spend, you're going to wind up in column 5 with a new budgeted debt service number, which reflects in the 2021 budget of about $4 million, and then in the 22 budget of about $4.4 million. So going forward, column 5 would be your new debt service that would appear in your budget. And then in column 6 and 7, it shows you what the new budgetary impact is. So you would need to phase in, under this scenario, new debt service of, about $700,000 in the 2021 year, and then about $376,000 in the 2022 year. So that shows how it would impact the budget going forward. And again, this just isolates this borrowing, so if you never did any other borrowings, column 5 would be what your new debt service is. I apologize if you can hear my kid yelling in the background. And then column 6 shows, what that does to your budget moving forward. Then over in columns 8 through 14, really, we translated that same budgetary impact into a millage number, because sometimes people like to think about it as far as millage instead of dollars. Okay, so assuming the value of a mill is $2.8 million, this shows in column 10 that the annual new mills needed to fund these projects, are about 0.2, 0.2, and 0.13 over the next 3 years. Now, I do want to point out some of that is already in place because you did get your series of 2019 already funded. So this is kind of the total for these 2 borrowings to fund these projects. So I'll pause there to see if there's any questions. The following page is the same page that you've seen in the past, which just shows, the full multi-year capital financing plan. We do expect, that will change as these projects evolve, but it's still meant to kind of give you a good guide as to how things might look in the future if you were to complete all of these projects. So page 5 is really, I think, the important page, which is focusing on, what's right in front of you now. And the last thing I'll say is, this is the maximum amount of $38 million, so if we decide to borrow less when we do go to market, all of these numbers we would expect would be smaller and would have less of an impact. So is there any questions that PFM or RBC can help answer?
Ms. Beeford, are there questions from the board?
Yes, we have 2 in this order, Dr. Haig and Mr. Desnoyers.
Hi, this is Dr. Haig. Thank you for the presentation. I just first wanted to clarify that the chart page is marked as page 2 that has the 2 charts top to bottom. I just want to confirm for myself and for the public that I understood you correctly. The top of the page 2, the debt service requirements, that's the total debt, whereas the local effort requirements, that's the part that we are actually paying. As in, some of the amounts that we see in the top chart are larger than the amounts we see on the bottom chart, and that the reason for that is that some of the debt is paid by state or other funds. Am I understanding that correctly?
So yes, you are understanding that correctly. The only caveat I'll add is, you actually do make the payments for column 10. So the district will submit those payments, and then you receive the reimbursement back afterwards. So that's what's reflected in column 20. But yes, you're correct. It's essentially what you're responsible for is the bottom half of the chart once you receive the reimbursement from the state.
Great. And then the other thing I wanted to just clarify is, if I'm a member of the public, probably the thing I'm most interested in for what we're talking about right now is this chart, page 6, and I'm understanding correctly that the cumulative impact of the debt series that we are talking about right now is essentially about $45 for a taxpayer with a house assessed at $75,000. It's $45 per year. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct.
So the public can look at board docs and go to page 5 of this document and see that information. Great, thank you.
Ms. Buford, there was another question. What was the other board member?
Mr. Desnoyers.
Yes, thank you for taking my my comment or my question. Many community members are quite concerned during this time because there has been some significant disruption in the financial markets. Community members, for instance, may have seen in the last 3 or 4 weeks very significant drops in the value of their retirement accounts. But I guess we have been through very significant financial market disruptions before. I'm thinking of the 2008-2009 recession, and prior to that, 9/11. And although those disruptions and their impacts were very significant, the financial markets did recover from those significant disruptions, and I just want to confirm that you do. It is reasonable to think that the financial markets will recover from this significant disruption as well.
Yes, well, so that's a very good question. I certainly don't know, the details of how the recovery is going to happen. I think that's anybody's guess, but I mean, it is expected that, our financial markets will eventually recover from this, and that the market will stabilize and things will return to some version of a new normal. When that happens, I couldn't tell you that, but, that is, I think, what people expect to happen.
Thank you. Ms. Buford, were there any other questions or comments from board members?
Not at this time.
I'd also like to add that these presentations are available on board docs so that you can see them in a much closer detail. There's also a 6th slide that was referenced, so you can see, although we're looking at the millage requirement study for this specific bond issuance, there is also the larger plan that the district has presented numerous times that will include all phases of our facility plans going forward. We just wanted to add that as additional information to be available again to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I just want to also remind those participating virtually, board members, administrators as well. The public can participate this evening by sending emails to committee questions at upperdarby.sd.org. They can also phone in and leave a message at 610-789-720, extension 2000, again, extension 2000. Members of the administration, the board, please continue to type in, I have a comment or a question, and then Ms. Buford will alert Board President Brown, and we'll take them in the order that Ms. Buford lets us know. Also, for the public, as a reminder, board will comment in between each item. We will allow public comment following all the agenda items for each of the meetings. Just want to again continue to say publicly you can participate by sending emails to committee questions at upperdarby.sd.org. You can phone in also at 610-789-7200, extension 2000. You must leave your name, number, address, as well as the agenda item you would like to leave a comment or a question for. Following this evening, if we do not get to all the comments and questions, they will be read into the record following this meeting at our April 14th meeting, and at that time, we will address any questions that we do not get to this evening. Mr. Brown, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McGarry. I wanted to just thank the teams from PFM and RBC Capital Markets for their great information. I appreciate that. Please stick around. I know we're going to move on to another agenda item, but I want them to be available in case the public has questions that they need to address. Mr. Rogers.
Agenda item number 2 is policy, which again will require board action. At this time, I'll hand the policy over to Mr. Desnoyers.
There were two policies that went through a first reading at our March board meeting, and they are policies 805.2, school security personnel, and policy 913, non-school organizations, groups, individuals. So I will provide a summary of the changes in this meeting now, and then in order to be enacted, these policy changes have to pass a second reading at our April 14th board meeting. The revision to policy 805.2, school security personnel, is a minor revision is being made to policy 805.2 to address issues that arose after the major revision last fall. And as far as policy 913, non-school organizations, groups, individuals, PSBA separated out non-school entity activities from non-school entity materials and aligned many of the definitions and verbiage between policy 913, this policy, and policy 220, student expression, distribution, and posting of materials, which will be discussed in the Education and Pupil Services Committee meeting. And the changes are pertaining to the posting and distribution of materials. The updates to this policy strike a balance between freedom of expression, a right guaranteed under the Constitution, and the duty of the school district to provide a safe and orderly environment. To accomplish this, the policy now aligns with the precepts of current case law and terminology used in state regulations. Limits on freedom of expression in the policy, therefore, following current case law, are in the form of time, place, and manner restrictions and are not restrictions on free speech itself. That concludes my policy summary.
Thank you, Mr. Desnoyers. Are there any questions from the board on the policy changes for those policies that are in the first reading? Are there any questions from the board?
Not at this time, Mr. Brown.
Seeing no more questions, we are at the time for public comments for the two agenda items. So, Ms. Beaufort, if you could let us know if we have any comments from the public on individual agenda items, please.
We have not received any comments or questions at this time from the public.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rogers, will you review the agenda items presented this evening, sir?
Agenda item number 1, the 2020 bond issuance, which will require board action. Again, PFM Financial Advisors and RBC Capital Markets provided an update on the district's 2020 financing plan. They are seeking authorization to proceed with the necessary steps to issue a general obligation bond later in 2020.
Is the board comfortable with moving that forward? Please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Aye.
Are there any?
Aye.
think that was 9 ayes and 1 yes. Are there any noes? Okay. Motion carries.
Agenda item number 2, policy, requires board action. It's policy 805.2, school security personnel, and 913, non-school organizations, groups, and individuals, both described by Mr. Desnoyers.
Is the board comfortable with moving those 2 policies to a second reading at our next committee meeting? Please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Yes.
Are there any noes? Motion carries. A motion is in order for adjournment of the Finance and Operations Committee meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right, meeting adjourned.